Hello and welcome to the Farming Week, the podcast from Agriland that keeps you up to date with the latest in Irish agriculture. I'm Francess McDonnell and joining me on this edition is Aisling O'Brien. And we'll also hear a little later from our colleague Charles O'Donnell, who's been in China and Korea this week. Well, it's officially back to school season in Ireland and sadly the end of the summer holidays. Despite the fact, according to Met Éireann, that summer 2024 was the coldest summer recorded in 9 years. However, despite local weather conditions, European farmers as a whole may be able to look forward to warmer relations with the European Commission in the months ahead, if a new report published this week is anything to go by. Aisling, what is this all about?
Yes, so back in January, listeners may recall that the President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, launched what she called the Strategic Dialogue on the Future of Agriculture in the EU, which she said would shape a shared vision for the future of the European Union's farming and food system. Now, of course, Francess, that move was part of a wider response by the EU Commission to farmer protests right across Europe, including here in Ireland, against low prices, lack of transparency in the food chain, the ever-increasing level of EU bureaucracy and red tape facing farmers, amongst many other issues that farmers took to the streets over. So over the last 7 months, stakeholders from across the agri-food chain have been taking part in this strategic dialogue. Now, it's a process, as you kind of alluded to there, which many have said is a welcome departure from maybe the more top-down approach that's been taken by the Commission previously on this. And it did seem to be a meeting of minds, so to speak. And the final report was published this week by the group overseeing the strategic dialogue. And it includes an assessment of the challenges and the opportunities facing the agri-sector across the EU, but also it includes a set of recommendations. Now, these suggestions are going to guide the work of the Commission when it's shaping its vision for agriculture and food. That's been promised by Ursula von der Leyen in the first 100 days of her second term in office. So we'll have to see what comes from that. And she did acknowledge that following the launch of this report, that farmers need a decent income and that the Dialogues report considers that food and agricultural production are an essential part of European society and security, and that the diversity of European food and farming is an important asset. Now, there are many recommendations, Francess, as you can imagine, in a European report of this scale, but just to highlight some that I think will be of interest to our listeners in particular. The first relates to CAP, of course, the Common Agricultural Policy. There's one currently in place at the moment providing €300 billion to farmers until 2027. But what happens after that? Well, that is the big question. So part of the report addressed the need to adapt the Common Agricultural Policy in what it said was the context of the ongoing transition towards more sustainable and competitive food systems, and the importance of strengthening farmers' position in the value food chain, access to finance, and the role of trade and international standards. It said that the current policy needs to be changed to meet current and future challenges and to accelerate the ongoing transition of agri-food systems towards more sustainable and competitive and diverse futures. And it said it was essential to make CAP fit for purpose in the context of the EU's enlargement process. And it said the future CAP should focus on central objectives such as providing socio-economic support targeted to farmers who need it most, promoting positive environmental, social and animal welfare outcomes for society, and invigorating enabling conditions for rural areas as well. And they said that based on farmers' economic viability, the CAP should deliver income support for certain active farmers in a much more targeted way. And that's something that's been called for a very, very long time, Francess. And CAP definitely needs a shake-up. And hopefully this report will be the impetus for that now as well. And they said that the dedicated support should prevent farm abandonment and help ensure that farmers can have a decent income as well. Now, they also said that financial supports for environmental and climate actions have to be substantially increased annually. And it called for a temporary just transition fund to be established outside of CAP, which is very important, to complement and support the sector's sustainability transition as well. So that is very interesting as well, kind of ring fencing extra funding for farmers to help them in their climate transitions on their farms, on the ground as well. And I think, look, a lot of people will be looking at that saying, yes, that is definitely needed, that farmers can't be expected to carry all of the burden. And the pot for CAP isn't big enough to include all of that as well, Francess, along with everything else that's expected of it.
Yeah, and we've kind of been expecting that there was going to be more of a conciliatory approach in the next session now of the Parliament coming up. We've sort of seen all the indicators of that. But has this report been welcomed? I know it's very early days for it.
Broadly, I think, is the way I'd read it at the moment. But I think the vast majority of the reaction is saying, right, the report is one thing. Now let's get down to work. Let's put this into action and let's see what happens. Now, Minister for Agriculture, Food and the Marine, Charlie McDonnell, has said that the European Commission is expected to bring forward proposals for the next CAP in summer 2025. And he said that this report will be one of the parts that will feed into that process as well. And he said he was committed to working with the EU institutions and other member states to continue the evolution of CAP and to make sure it's fit for purpose. We've often heard from Charlie McDonnell when he goes over to Brussels to meet with his counterparts over there that the CAP budget needs to be expanded. It's something that we've seen the EU Agriculture Commissioner say repeatedly as well during his term, Francess. So Charlie McDonnell said the development of the report, it followed an extensive engagement with stakeholders across the EU. And it is an important input into the overall process of looking at CAP beyond 2027 as well. Now, the IFA president, Francie Gorman, said that farmers would be taking a cautious approach to this strategic dialogue. He said that the European Commission must use a twin-track approach, is how he described it. One to support food production and the other to enhance climate action. And that goes back to ring-fencing that funding outside of CAP for this just transition, is how they would term it. Now, Copa Cogeca, they are the umbrella group representing over 22 million EU farmers. They also represent co-ops as well across the bloc. They've called for swift and coherent actions to be taken in the wake of this report. They said that they remain vigilant on a number of points in the report, particularly the place of livestock farming and also recommendations around balanced diets. The report actually pointed to improve the sustainable balance between animal and plant-based protein intake at European population level. The report said it's crucial to support this trend by rebalancing towards plant-based options. So I'd say farming organisations will not be best pleased with that part of the report. But the COPA president, Christiane Lambert, said that the report should be viewed as the beginning of a constructive process, which she said would lead to a more balanced and strategic view of agriculture under Ursula von der Leyen. And she said that we have to continue this dialogue and involve the European Parliament and the EU Council in this, all of the wings of the European Union, so to speak. And they also noted that there is a proposal in the report to create a European board on agri-food, which would be a high-level forum, essentially, for ongoing and deeper exchanges amongst the key players at European level, is what we're being told. And that would build on what seems to be, as you say, a conciliatory process, which has been started by Ursula von der Leyen and is going some way, I think, to maybe repair the damage and the narrative that has been out there for so long, that it's kind of a them versus us when it comes to the agriculture sector as well. Generational renewal is also mentioned in the report. Francess Seja, the European Council of Young Farmers, noting that as well. They took part in this 7-month process as well. And they said the final report provides young farmers with practical pathways in the sustainable transition. And the report contains a number of recommendations, such as a new action plan and the introduction of a €3 billion loan package from the European Investment Bank, which would have preferential access for European young farmers. So that would be of interest as well. And Fine Gael Midlands Northwest MEP Maria Walsh, who's a part of the European Parliament's Agriculture Committee, gave her reaction as well. She said one of the most significant recommendations in her view was the overhaul of CAP, which she said is long overdue and badly needed. And she said without a meaningful CAP reform, the long-term viability of many Irish family farms is in question. So, a broad welcome, I would say, Francess, but people want this not just to be put up on a shelf. They want this process to be built on.
Yeah, I suppose we're going to have to wait and see if this is going to be the blueprint now that's going to come into play. and actually what it means on the ground. But in the meantime, as our regular listeners know, we keep a very close eye on all things dairy here in Agriland, both at home and in relation to global dairy markets. In the last few days, we've seen a very slight fall in the global dairy trade, the GDT price index, and one of the biggest co-ops in the country, Churlawn, has unveiled a proposal to spin out around 15 million shares in Glanbia plc, which is worth a potential €239 million to its members. According to Churlawn, for every 1,000 shares that a member currently holds in Churlawn Co-op, they will receive approximately in the region of €7,000 in value in the form of Glanbia shares, or €26,604 for an average active shareholder. But that's not been the only development, has it, Aisling, specifically on the co-op front this week?
Yes, Frances, that's true. Very interesting development today. Arrabawn Co-op and Tipperary Co-op released a joint statement today, Thursday, confirming that they have entered preliminary exclusive discussions regarding possible integration of their operations, including potential amalgamation, which would be a merger in layman's terms. So there was a joint statement issued by both businesses today saying that an exclusive exploratory process has been undertaken by the neighbouring co-ops with a view to creating a stronger entity within the Irish dairy sector. Now, if they did combine, the milk pool of both would place a combined entity in the top 4 co-op processors in the country. So this would be a significant move, Frances. Now, they did warn, though, that discussions here are at an early phase. There's been no decisions made, they say, around potential transition at this point. And they said that any change in their structure, of course, would be subject to a due diligence process. And it would require approval of the board of directors and ultimately, of course, the milk suppliers for both Arrabawn and Tipperary, as well as regulatory approvals as well. I'm sure the Competition and Consumer Protection Commission, the CCPC, would have a role here as well. And they said that a merger would only be considered if it would enhance the return for milk suppliers, members, employees and customers, while at the same time maintaining the co-op's commitment to delivering the highest quality product and sustainable development of the Irish dairy sector. And they said that further updates will be provided as appropriate, but in the meantime, both co-ops will continue to operate their businesses as usual as well. And look, a very interesting development there, Frances. I suppose, look, it is going back to what is happening in the wider sector as well. And it looks like the co-ops are reacting to that as well. We are seeing obviously drops in milk intake at the moment, and will be interesting to see if this possible merger will go through.
And also, Aisling, this week we had an announcement from Dairygold Co-op.
Yeah, so we had reported this on Agriland previously, but this week Dairygold confirmed that it has launched its milk supplier census, which will cover the period from 2025 to 2030. The co-op said it's to capture the milk production ambitions of its suppliers over the next 6 years. And they said they'll use that data provided by milk suppliers to inform how they and the society can work in partnership to deliver a long-term sustainable future for farming. Now, the Cork-based co-op last carried out a census back in 2020, and the Dairygold chair, Sean O'Brien, said that since then, the dairy market and policy landscape in which we all operate has changed very significantly. And he pointed to sustainability and environmental challenges, the nitrates derogation, emissions targets. He said all of that has fundamentally changed the operating environment for both dairy farmers and processors out there. And he said that the results of this census will inform the decisions needed to support milk suppliers' production ambitions and to deliver sustainable growth for farmers and for Dairygold as well. And he said that getting a full and accurate response to this census cannot be overemphasized. And he urged all milk suppliers for Dairygold to return the census form, which they're getting a copy of this week, by the 4th of October. And they can fill out the paper form, they can do it online or over the phone with a member of the Dairygold team. So there's a couple of options there as well. And look, similar to other milk processors around the country, Dairygold has been impacted by reduced volumes this year. Last month, they told Agriland that 2024 milk supply volume was then running at about 6.3% behind the previous year, with an annual forecast for 2024 of around 1.36 billion litres, which would be about 3.5% lower than 2023. but that would be based on a strong finish to 2024 as well. So Dairygold also making moves this week.
Okay, and we'll just stick with the dairy sector for a bit longer because against the backdrop of a Chinese investigation into subsidies paid to European dairy farmers, the Minister for Agriculture, Food and the Marine, Charlie McConnell, and Minister of State with responsibility for new market development, Martin Hayden, have both been leading trade missions to both China and the Republic of Korea this week. My colleague Charles O'Donnell has also been in Shanghai and Seoul this week to hear what opportunities there are for Irish produce in these markets, and he can tell us now how the trade missions have been going.
Yes, Francis. The two ministers have been in China and South Korea this week to promote Irish dairy and spirits in China and beef in South Korea. The trade mission took in 3 major cities, 2 in China, the capital Beijing as well as Shanghai, and 1 in South Korea, its capital Seoul. The Beijing leg of the mission saw Minister McConnell engage in a series of high-level political meetings with China's General Administration of Customs Controls, which is the body that controls market access of agri-food products to China, and he also met with officials from the Ministry of Agriculture and Rural Affairs. The aim in Beijing was to further advance the prospects of getting market access to China for bone-in beef, beef offal and germinal products. Minister McConnell also used these meetings to state the position of Ireland and the EU on farm scheme supports for the dairy sector, which is at the centre of a trade dispute between China and the EU at present, as we've covered on the Farming Week previously. The Minister used the opportunity to state that the EU's farm supports are in line with World Trade Organization rules. Moving on to Shanghai then, and the trade mission took on a more industry rather than political feel, with Ministers McConnell and Hayden speaking at a special seminar to promote Irish dairy. Irish suppliers were showcased here, and Chinese commercial players were also in attendance to learn more about the Irish offering. One of the most interesting things we learned at the seminar is that baby formula, which has typically been the main driver of Chinese demand for Irish dairy in the form of milk powder, will in the future be taking a backseat to nutritional and medical uses for milk powder, which will be the main driver of demands going forward. This is down to both a sharp decline in the birth rate to just about half of what it was just a few years ago, as well as an ageing population that have particular health requirements that milk powder can be used for, as well as a generally more health-conscious population that are part of an expanding middle class in China. After the dairy seminar, Minister Hayden then went on to speak at the launch event of Bord Bia's Spirit of Ireland drinks campaign, which has been developed to give an insight into the history and heritage of Irish spirits and to build increased awareness of Ireland's drinks category in foreign markets. Then moving across the water to South Korea, and beef was the big focus here, with Irish beef being officially launched in that country. Ireland, of course, achieved market access for beef to South Korea in May of this year. The Seoul leg of the trade mission saw a beef seminar, similar to the dairy seminar in Shanghai, to showcase Irish beef and inform potential South Korean customers of the Irish product. Further events are set for tomorrow as well to mark Irish beef's entry to the Korean market. And when you're on these trade missions, you tend to bump into a lot of different characters. And in a city of almost 10 million people, I managed to find the one taxi driver who had a lot to say about beef, and he spoke very good English, and he said that if it's a choice between US beef, Australian beef and Irish beef, it's not even a contest, he's going for Irish beef all day long. And although that's just one man's opinion, I wouldn't be surprised if that was a more general feeling as well in a country that eats more beef than any other in Asia.
And Charles also got the opportunity to ask Minister McConnell directly what the current position is in relation to the ongoing Chinese investigation.
One of the reasons this trip is so timely as well is the fact that it gave me an opportunity to reiterate very strongly and put very clearly the view of the Irish government and the very confident view we have that the schemes that we have in place are fully compliant with World Trade Organization trading rules. And we'll obviously assist the European Commission in terms of being able to respond to the questions that the Chinese government have asked. But I'm totally confident, given the strong responses that we have and the strong position we have, that we can reach a successful conclusion.
And that was the Minister for Agriculture speaking to my colleague Charles O'Donnell in Shanghai earlier this week. But it's not just the current investigation by Chinese officials into subsidies paid to European dairy farmers that is high on the agenda for the Minister for Agriculture at the moment, because he's also been asked to outline his position on the National Bovine Tuberculosis (TB) eradication programme by a number of farming organisations. Aisling, why is the Minister facing fresh questions over the TB eradication programme?
Yes, Francis. So the IFA and the Irish Cattle and Sheep Farmers Association, the ICSA, both issued statements this week following an online meeting of the TB Forms Implementation Working Group. They met online on Tuesday, where the Department of Agriculture gave an update on the National TB Eradication Programme, which, as we've previously discussed here on the show, spending on that has actually jumped to over €40 million in the first 6 months of this year. But unfortunately, all of the statistics are going in the wrong direction when it comes to herds being locked up and reactors around the country. So following the meeting, the IFA and the ICSA both voiced concerns about staffing levels for the TB eradication programme. The IFA Animal Health Committee Chair TJ Maher said, "We're going to lose up to 10,000 more productive animals from our farms this year, with reactor numbers predicted to hit 40,000. And he said over 700 more farms to date, or 5.5% of herds, have had their farms restricted. While at the same period, the Wildlife Control Programme, which is run under this eradication programme, have only dealt with an extra 200 badgers. And the IFA Animal Health Chair said that the department confirmed that the Wildlife Control Programme is losing 8 full-time staff as a result of the government's moratorium on recruitment in the public service. And he said that, interestingly, no figures were available during the meeting for the broader impact of this moratorium on staff resources across the veterinary and technical officer levels in the TB programme. And he said these are critical areas in investigating and resolving TB breakdowns and ensuring the timely removal of reactors, which he said, of course, are vital if we're to get TB numbers back under control. Now, Maher called on Minister Charlie McConalogue and his government colleagues to make a statement on this matter. And ICSA Animal Health and Welfare Chair John Barron echoed this, and he said that Department of Agriculture officials during that meeting had raised concerns about their ability to fully implement the TB eradication programme due to shortages in both financial and human resources. And he said it was simply unacceptable, especially as the number of reactors is increasing out there and the hardship that is caused by a TB breakdown on a farm as well. And he said the shortage of personnel has long been a serious issue nationwide, with fewer and fewer people available to carry out the important work of the TB eradication programme. And he said staff shortages also impact, as well as what TJ Maher said, how swiftly reactors can be removed following a breakdown. And he said instead of recruiting staff, a moratorium on hiring new personnel has put in place, meaning that these issues will simply persist.
Yes, because we had heard from the Secretary General of DAFM, Brendan Gleeson, earlier this year that TB in Ireland had reached a point where he said a different approach was needed to tackle the disease. And he had described it as a very significant issue. So it's obviously an issue that DAFM are looking at whether they need to change their strategy.
Yeah, and we are seeing farmers on the ground are very concerned, Francess. Farm organisations are holding meetings around the country about this as well. TB was raised at a recent meeting held by the IFA in County Clare. The Irish Nature and Hill Farmers Association held a meeting down here in Kerry as well about TB. Farmers are very, very concerned about where all of this is going. And look, the minister, there is pressure on now him just to see what they can deliver in terms of improving staffing levels out there, because that is what we need out there. We'll need boots on the ground to make sure that this wildlife control programme is adequately resourced and is properly implemented on the ground as well.
Yeah, because we've seen the impact on farm families when you're watching the lorry drive away from your yard, and it's just so devastating when you have TB.
Devastating, and it stays with farmers for years. There are scars that are so deep on a farmer and their family as well, because
you're terrified it's going to happen again. That's the basic line. So it is. You're just terrified you're going to be a victim again.
Yeah, because I mean, if you go to the level that you're depopulated, and that's horrendous, even having 1 or 2 reactors leaving your yard is difficult. But for those who are completely depopulated, and I've spoken to farmers out there who have been, and as you say, there is that fear when they hear of maybe a neighbour getting locked up, that this is coming back to their door once more. And it is very, very traumatising. It's so, so upsetting, Francess. So look, it is definitely a real issue that needs to be looked at very seriously by the government.
Yeah. And of course, now we have been talking about nitrates derogation for a while. That's obviously coming up again for the minister. But this week, Agriland was out on a farm walk in Moneygall in County Offaly, where the chair of Arrabawn, Edward Carr, who's also the chair of the Irish Cooperative Organisation Society, ICOS, urged farmers to do what they have to do to retain the nitrates derogation and he highlighted that improving waterways is key to this. His appeal to farmers came in the same week that the Minister of State with responsibility for nature, heritage and electoral reform, Malcolm Noonan, launched the Water Action Plan 2024, Ireland's third river basin management plan. Key actions in this plan include tighter controls for the use of fertilisers that impact water quality, a greater focus on compliance and enforcement with 60 new staff at local level, and a target of 4,500 farm inspections per year. And you can find out more about that plan on our app or at Agriland.ie. Now, we couldn't let this week pass, Aisling, without mentioning the launch of an event that is in all our diaries for later this month. And that is?
Of course, it can only be the National Ploughing Championships, Francess, because the countdown is well and truly on. Our colleague Louise Hickey went down to Ratheniska this week for the official launch. There was Irish dancers on cue, there was hounds and huntsmen up on horses, and of course the NPA, they're in full force as well, and preparations well underway now in Ratheniska. Of course, it's taking place from the 17th until the 19th of this month. If you don't have it in your calendar, you definitely need to put it in at this point. And all of our favourite attractions are set to return this year. We're being told everything from fashion shows to sheep shearing. Of course, there's going to be ploughing, and there's going to be live music, dancing, and all of the rest of the trade stands. And of course, Agriland will be front and centre as well in the centre of the site. So make sure to pop in and say hello to us if you're going to the National Ploughing Championships this year. Now, look, of course, we're hoping for good weather. Anna Marie McHugh, of course, she's the Assistant Managing Director of the National Ploughing Association. She said weather conditions up to this point for laying of all of these roadways that we see, kilometres of roadways around Ratheniska, to make sure the site can be accessible to everybody who's visiting. It's been good so far, and she's hoping that the rain will stay away as well. Obviously, we had some tricky conditions last year.
Tricky is one word for it, Ashley.
yeah.
Torrential might be another.
Yeah, there was a couple of pushing of cars out of of car parks and everything like that. But as I said 12 months ago, it brought everybody together. We were united with the rain and in the mud, Francess, down in Ratheniska. But hopefully.
Yeah, I've heard various people talk about, getting lineups of Child of Prague outside their doors and various things. And then if anybody else has any ideas how to alter the weather for the Ploughing Championship, we'd love to hear it here at Agriland too.
Absolutely. Whatever the equivalent of a rain dance is, but for dry weather, we'd very much appreciate that as well. And of course, there's going to be hundreds of thousands of people will descend on the site, this year as well. And there will be a lot of people ploughing they're down there as well. And in addition to the regular ploughing classes, the national classes, the European Vintage Championships are taking place on Tuesday and Wednesday as well. And there'll be participants from England, Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland, Belgium, of course, Ireland and Germany as well. So there's lots and lots to see. And we did catch up with the current national champion and world ploughing champion, Eamon Tracy, who we spoke about recently on the podcast following Ireland's double win on the global stage. And he told Louise that he's looking forward to facing his competitors this year, but I'm sure it won't be easy.
Looking forward to this week. They're all going to be gunning for me now, being the current national champion and the current world champion. Everyone is going to be there to beat me. And I'm looking forward to the challenge. And it's going to be difficult. I do know that. Ireland is full of great ploughmen.
Now, so that's Eamon Tracy there, the world ploughing champion, who's bidding to retain his title in Ratheniska in a couple of weeks. And obviously, I'm sure he'll be part of the team down there that's setting up the plots as well. When we spoke to him, he was very, very busy doing that as well. So definitely not a man to be idle, Francess. And for those making their way to Ratheniska in 2 weeks' time as well, Gardaí have reminded everybody just to adhere to the traffic management plan. Regular visitors to the ploughing will know there's all these different routes, but don't worry, Agriland will keep you in the loop. So make sure to stay tuned to the website and the app, and we'll give you all you need to know to access the site closer to the time.
And just before we go, I wanted to mention a story from our technical machinery specialist, Justin Roberts, that has been really popular with our readers this week. And it's all about a Massey Ferguson 135, which, Aisling, I believe hails from your part of the world.
It does indeed. So Justin is constantly touring Ireland and overseas to bring great content to our readers on all matters machinery. And he recently attended the National Irish Vintage Rally. as he said, in the kingdom. And he came across a Massey Ferguson 135 owned by Sean Cronin from Kerry. Now, he said, initially it was pretty unremarkable, but then he had a closer look at it. And he said for a 45-year-old unrestored tractor, it was in excellent shape with all of the original tin work still in place and no sign of rust anywhere about it. And he said it was still looking good and in excellent working order. It cost 5,000 punts back in 1979. And what makes it even more remarkable, Francess, is that it had spent 2 decades on yard scraping duties. It's still in light use today, and it does the occasional small job around the yard or topping as well, with an actual topper that was purchased in 1970 by Sean's father for 130 punts. And what is the secret to all of this longevity? Well, you'll have to read the piece to find out a bit more, but here's a clue. It's zinc. But it's a really, really lovely piece, and it's really grabbed the attention of our readers this week. So well done to Sean and his family. They've clearly minded that Massey, and it looks like it'll have a few more years yet, because I think there was something like 14,000 working hours on the clock when Justin came across it. And maybe there'll be another few thousand yet in it.
We're going to say the secret is that special air you keep telling us that's down in Kerry. Aisling.
Oh, no comment.
That's all we have time for this week. So now from Aisling and myself, thanks for listening. And please don't forget to rate, review and follow The Farming Week on Spotify, Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts. We hope you have a good week ahead.